Okay, so here we are on the draw. We have the potential to turn one animate dead. We have one land plus dark ritual, entomb, animate dead. So any one land reanimation, one turn one reanimation possibilities, we have to keep that. So we are gonna keep. This is a deck that definitely doesn't like any type of disruption, like force of will or discard stuff like that. But most decks in the format are either quick combo decks like this one, or have a decent amount of disruption. So polluted delta means we could be up against a Delver deck, perhaps. So we have the option now. Once we see the delta, we're a little bit more wary of just going for essentially what could be just be the win on this turn. So another option would just be the Faithless Looting, and the reason why I like the Faithless Looting line now is because it can set us up to win through a daze next turn. Now, playing the Badlands out does make us vulnerable to Wasteland. But we'll see. So it looks like our opponent's actually going to respond to the Faithless Looting. So our opponent actually had a counter spell, so we're happy we took this line. But I'm also pretty surprised to see our opponent so readily use that Flusterstorm in this spot. But it looks like maybe this is a sneak and show deck that we're playing against. Although, no sign of show and tell just yet. The fact that our opponent used that Flusterstorm earlier signals a little bit that our opponent may have an additional counterspell. So it's a little bit of a tough spot. We can just go for Dark Ritual, Entomb, Animate Dead. We'd like to be able to play this Collective Brutality, but we really don't have the opportunity to with only one land, so I'm going to go ahead and try for the Dark Ritual. And we'll see what happens here. Alright, so our opponent's responding with an Intuition. This is interesting now. So our opponent might actually have the counterspell, and we don't know it. So, but we're not gonna want to give our opponent something like a daze or a force of will. Okay, so our opponent's essentially forcing an omniscience into our opponent's hand. So we know we're up against like Omnitel, basically. So our opponent is able to find an omniscience here. And now force pitching omniscience. So it looks like our opponent just needed a blue card for force of will. Interesting. So we're still not under any pressure yet, but at any point our opponent could just find the combo they're looking for. Animate Dead is a great pickup. So we now need a second mana source, which we did not find just there. So it's interesting. We could discard the Tidespout Tyrant. The issue, though, is that it's actually a good card to put into play with Sneak and Show. So I'm going to pitch Entomb and Collective Brutality, leaving essentially 2 reanimation effects plus a Thoughtseize. If we brick on our next turn, we can just Thoughtseize our opponent. So I think we're still in a good spot, assuming that we don't get sneak attacked right here or something of that nature. Omniscience. If our opponent's able to put in Omniscience with Show and Tell, then they can just cast Emrakul or Cunning Wish or something of that nature, and then just win immediately with Omniscience. So we may not be playing against the sneak attack version of this deck, but we know the deck has Omniscience in it. And okay. So now we want to just go ahead and go for Exhume. Maybe our opponent has another counterspell. We'll see. Looks like Brainstorm, so our opponent may be looking for a Force of Will at this juncture. Hopefully we get this through. And it looks like our opponent's just going to concede there. So the Exhume was going to resolve. We would get back our Gristlebrand, and that was going to be enough to take it down there. So, okay, looking at the sideboard. I haven't actually played this matchup that much because it's not that popular. But we do want Duresses for sure. It's mostly non-creature spells trying to combo us out. Even though we're on the draw, I still like Sire of Insanity. It's much better on the play because you can turn 1 it and just basically win the game on the spot. But we don't really want Elishnorn because our opponent doesn't have that many small creatures. So giving our opponent's creatures -2/-2 doesn't seem great. The Stronghold Gambits, they're interesting here. We could play them because our opponent's unlikely to have cheap creatures. They may have Emrakuls. Not sure. I don't think most lists typically play Snapcaster Mages. So Stronghold Gambit, definitely worthy of consideration. And I like doing some shaving. Chancellor, I think we can shave on that. Same with Exhume. Chromox is also cuttable. Yeah, I like this. So we're on the draw here, of course, because we won game 1. And we have multiple discard spells and mana ramp. So that's good. What we don't have is a creature. We have the Animate Dead. I think we want to keep this. Reason being is that we have Disruption, and we're basically only 1 creature or 1 Entomb away from having our combo set up. So sometimes you have to keep a hand like this in this type of matchup where we need reactive spells as well. So we don't necessarily need to have the win right off the bat, but we actually drew Entomb, which was a great pickup. We know our opponent has Force of Will in their deck. So that's a reason not to just go for Dark Ritual, Entomb, Animate Dead, but we have 2 Dark Rituals, so what we can do is we can actually play both Dark Rituals and then play the discard spells as well. Assuming that our opponent doesn't counter the first Dark Ritual, which maybe our opponent does elect to counter Dark Ritual, but normally, very rarely does the opponent actually elect to counter the Dark Rituals. So I'm going to go ahead and Dark Ritual twice. Now we can go for Duress and really just pick apart our opponent's entire hand. So we see Omniscience and Cunning Wish. So our opponent's essentially missing Show and Tell to be able to Show and Tell Omniscience. Well, we should be taking Omniscience here for sure. We know that our opponent doesn't have any counter magic. So I think we just go for Entomb here, and Sire of Insanity should win us the game, I believe. So I'm just gonna go for that. Pretty unlikely that our opponent could come back from this situation. Basically, we have a 5/4, and our opponent's forced to basically discard every single turn. Looks like they just drew an Emrakul. So, yeah, this doesn't happen all the time, but being able to essentially win on turn 1 is pretty nice. Now, I would say there's like 2% chance that our opponent finds a way to come back, but it's probably even lower than that. It's almost impossible because our opponent is never going to have. Basically, there's no card that is an answer to the Sire of Insanity in our opponent's deck, as far as we know, at least. If our opponent had a card like Echoing Truth, that would be good, but almost certainly game over. Our opponent's probably going to take 1 fetch, looking for who knows what. Well, it looks like they're drawing a card. Okay. So it's going to be a Brainstorm. And that's going to be the match.